everybody, what's up? Chad Wesley Smith here at JuggernautHQ with the new head coach, powerlifting, weightlifting czar. That'll be your official title.
Yeah.
Weightlifting czar, Max Aita.
Hey everybody.
So we took some questions through Instagram and Facebook yesterday for Max, and he's got a very extensive background in both weightlifting and powerlifting. Spent 13 years of his life squatting every day, daily maxes. Mark totally, he stole my joke about that's why they named me Max.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, what a dick. He's always trying to steal the funny things I say. But yeah, so spent 13 years of his life training in the Bulgarian style or the squat every day plan. So probably better equipped than anyone to talk about that kind of training. Has since transitioned to powerlifting, where he squatted 738 at 220 in reps. Has coached tremendous lifters from Joanne Aita pulling 385 at 114, Christy Hawkins, the 165 squat, deadlift, and total world record, and the American record in the bench. Squatted 220 kilos, 484 at 75 kilo body weight, 165 pounds in sleeves. Let that sink in for a moment. So a lot of variety of experience, a lot of knowledge to share. So there's going to be just a couple of questions that we touch on today for you guys. So Max, obviously you were a high bar squatter when you were weightlifting. If someone is high bar squatting, how would you suggest for them to transition to becoming a low bar squatter?
What I would do for someone who's going from high bar to low bar, I'm assuming it's for powerlifting.
If it's for weightlifting, stop.
Yes, if it's for any other reason than powerlifting, it's not worth it. What I generally do with people is when they come in the gym, Christy's a good example, they come in the gym, if they're squatting high bar, we'll continue with that for a while, work on building quad strength till they have an adequate amount of strength in their legs to maintain the position. And once that point's been reached, we can move the bar down slightly. All I do really that's different for low bar and high bar is slide the bar down their traps. Maybe an inch, maybe the total width of the bar. I don't want to change the technique of it, because if you transition from high bar to low bar and have a dramatically different position, start sitting way back, you'll end up in really funky places that you're not strong or possibly injuring yourself. When I went from squatting high bar all the time, squatting every day, many times a day, to switching to a low bar squat, I started changing the mechanics of what I was doing, sliding my hips way back, sitting back, putting lots of pressure on my adductor and hamstring, and I ended up tearing both of them a couple of times. Since that point, my athletes have never had that problem. We'll go from high bar squats in the training cycle. As we get closer to the meet, we'll slowly move the bar down, and everything else stays the same. The position of the torso changes slightly because the bar is lower, so you go from being upright to being slightly forward or slightly leaned over, and that's about it. Everything else we're trying to do identical. So we're trying to keep our knees in position, use our quads as much as possible, and it's kind of, in my opinion, the low bar squat is a great way to utilize some manipulation of your body leverages and everything to get the most out of it for powerlifting.
I have said that I think the high bar squat is the best way to build strength.
Yes.
The low bar squat the best way to express that strength.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lifter to compete last weekend, did a whole couple, 3 or 4 training cycles with low bar squats, and really didn't go anywhere with the squat until we switched him to high bar for a whole training cycle, and he put about 60 pounds on his squat. So he went high bar till about 2-3 weeks before the meet. Then we moved the bar down his traps a couple inches, and he he maybe took his old 1 rep max and did it for 5. And to me that was excellent, because he didn't have to do a whole lot of different stuff. His squat looked identical to the way it did when he had a high bar squat, just slightly more leaned over.
And I think something to consider with that too is if you're wanting to train high frequency and high volume in the squat, the high bar squat tends to allow for that a lot better. It's not as taxing to the low back. It's not going to be as stressful on your wrists and elbows and shoulders. And if you're a competitive powerlifter, of course you need to be able to bench press too. Yeah. So if you're trying to low bar squat 4 times a week and it's killing your wrists and elbows and you can't bench, that's going to hurt your total. So the next question we got was about warm-ups. And for a lot of warm-up stuff, we want to defer to Dr. Quinn Hennock. Make sure you guys read his article, The Best Damn Squat Mobility Article, period. And it's going to address tons of the problems that you may be facing. But Max, what are some things that you do for warming up for a squat session?
So when I squatted every day, multiple times a day, there was a point in time where I was able to walk into the gym and I could squat, I think One day, Spencer Mormon, we had a little bet one day in the gym that he couldn't power snatch 120 cold and I couldn't squat 280 cold.
Kilos.
So he made the 120, or he missed the 120, I think, and then he loaded 280 for me and I squatted it without warming up. That's the first thing I did that day, like 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't have a specific warm-up I do. I mean, I'll just walk up to the bar and start squatting. If things are irritated or something is tight or tense or painful or uncomfortable, then I get to the point where I feel I can do a squat and it feels comfortable, and then I start squatting.
And that's obviously going to be unique to whatever
Right.
feels bad on you.
Right. If there's, and some people, if you have stiffness and you have a difficult time moving and you need to do more warm-ups, it's not that doing less warm-ups is somehow better, it's just that your squat mechanics and your training should dictate how you're going to move when you warm up. In my opinion, it's just easier to walk in and start moving and getting, the actual squat movement down.
What was the typical, how you would work up to the max? So keep in mind that Max was squatting, front squat max, about 6 times per session or per day.
The first squat workout would usually be I'd walk in, put my shoes on, bend my knees a few times.
That's the main part of the warm-up for me.
That's the main part, yeah. Bend my knees to make sure that, nothing's gonna break. And then the first weight I would do would be 120 kilos, then 170, then 220, and then 240, 50, or 60, depending on how I felt. Same for the back squat, just 120, 170, 220, 270, 300.
Did you guys even, you just leave that loaded on the bar?
Yeah, I bought some 50 kilos and left them on the squat bar. And that was there was always a bar in the corner at Cal Strength that would just have 2 50-kilo bumpers on it, squatting. No, everyone knew not to use it because most people can't warm up with 120, so it was not a big issue. But
It's Max's max.
that was my max out bar, yeah. But that was, you get accustomed to it. And the same thing, even if you squat twice a week. I squatted with Borsheko, we'd squat twice a week, and the same principle. I'd walk in and put my shoes on, do a few movements, make sure everything, nothing was doing something weird and have some weird tightness or pain. Then I'd start with the first warm-up set and just work from there.
I think that's something really important to keep in mind when you read that article from Quinn or watch his videos, what is tightness or why stretching isn't the answer. You really see that once you establish a proper movement pattern, and you may need to do some mobility work to be able to get to that point, but once you've established it, just frequently practicing it is going to allow you to, it just becomes the way that you squat.
Yeah.
And you don't need to necessarily warm up to do that. You just do it with no weight or with a little bit of weight, and then with more weight and more weight and more weight. And I don't think, no one's going to look at me and be like, I bet Chad's really, really mobile. I bet he's really flexible. But I can go in, every squat workout and just, put my shoes on, which does break a bit of a sweat, and put my shoes on and start at the, I start at the bar every time. I go to the bar, 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, 4 plates, so on and so forth, all the way up. I'm not having to warm up necessarily. And it's the same thing as Max, once in a while, if I have, a specific issue going on, I'm gonna do a movement prep drill for that. But if I feel good, then it's just straight to the bar. And once you can establish that idea, if you've read Matt Perryman's book, Squat Every Day, that would be that's really the issue. The idea that he's getting at is not necessarily training the squat every single day or training heavy squats every day, but it's doing the squatting movement pattern every day in some load, whether very light or very heavy, and that's just going to practice that movement pattern and hone it that well.
Yeah, it's true. I think that if you thought about it as you only have one thing to do to warm up for the squat, would it be squatting or would it be something completely different? You want to make sure all the muscles that are being worked in the squat are going through the proper range of motion for the squat. So to me, the most common thing to do would be do a squat, right? It might be with body weight, then the bar, then 10, 15 reps just messing around, moving around, but doing something completely unrelated that's very far distant from it is not going to prepare those tissues and muscles for it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if you do choose to use stuff like foam rolling or band distraction work, you need to use that with its limited application, which is going to be 30 seconds of foam rolling, and then stand up and do 10 bodyweight squats or 10 goblet squats. You need to use the new mobility that you're finding from those drills, you need to use it in the pattern that you're getting ready to perform during your training.
Yeah.
And make sure you guys, again, read Dr. Quinn Hannock's articles about this on Juggernaut, check his website out, Clinical Athlete, a lot of great information about it. Yeah, I mean, he steals a ton of ideas from me about proper mobility, but yeah, he has a lot of really great information, so make sure you guys check that out. And so the last thing we want to talk about, and again, you're probably one of the best people to talk about for this because you've competed in both, you've trained people for both, is the idea of combining weightlifting and powerlifting training into the same program.
Yeah. So I've had a few people do both. My wife, Joanne, did both basically simultaneously or within different periods that were very close. The biggest takeaways for it, I'm not going to go too into depth, would be to structure things from motor qualities that are most important, need to be trained at the right time. So you're not going to be doing heavy snatch and clean and jerk right next to a powerlifting meet, and you're not going to be doing heavy deadlifts and heavy bench presses right next to a weightlifting meet. Structure your training in a way that allows for you to, transition from both sports, but also specialize slightly for each sport, right? You don't want to have the same program going into a powerlifting meet as you would going into a weightlifting meet. They need to be slightly different, and they need to emphasize the most important qualities. A program that does weightlifting and powerlifting is a compromise program, right? You're compromising both sports to do both because you want to have fun at both. So you have to understand that you may have to compromise things like if you pull sumo, you're probably not going to train it a lot during the weightlifting phases, right? So that is a special exercise that needs to be pushed more into the powerlifting stuff where it's closer to a powerlifting meet. You're going to train clean deadlifts and snatch deadlifts because they'll still build general strength for the conventional or the sumo, not nearly as much as you would developing, pulling for sumo, but those kind of things need to be taken into account. And then the bench press stuff is, again, another same kind of thing where you're going to bench press a lot more aggressively, as you get closer to a powerlifting meet. As you're doing weightlifting, that's going to back off a lot. Some people have special situations where their shoulders are capable of tolerating that. They don't develop any tightness from the bench for the snatch or the clean and jerk. And those kind of things are advantages. Some people have a harder time, right? They start bench pressing and they start losing mobility in the shoulder for the snatch. So again, it's a very specialized program. It can be done. It's just going to be, a compromise on either side. And you can definitely peak for powerlifting and then peak for weightlifting and go back and forth throughout the year. Another suggestion would be to maybe pick a few meets. You have to plan a lot longer because you have much bigger spread between the two sports. So you're going to pick powerlifting maybe the first half of the year and then weightlifting the second half, right? Rather than I'm going to do this powerlifting meet 2 weeks before national championships or before the qualifier for nationals is probably not the best idea. I've seen it happen and I've seen it being done, but it's definitely not recommended. And then vice versa, if you're going to do a weightlifting meet, the last 2 weeks before a powerlifting meet during your taper and deload, you're not going to do a bunch of snatch and clean and jerks and then go max out at a meet and see what you can do and then find out that you can't squat or pull at the powerlifting meet. Yeah, it's individualized, but in general, those things can be taken into account. Longer term planning and then understanding where the compromises are and taking advantage of the things you can.
I'm Chad Wesley Smith. He's Max Aita. We're at JuggernautHQ. Come learn how to lift things from us. And subscribe to the channel.